So, good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Born to Thrive, Not Just Survive. So, today I've got a guest who has been through some really challenging things from childhood and has a really captivating and powerful story to tell. He's a mental health practitioner, he's a public speaker, and I think most importantly, he's gone through a real journey of turning what was really painful into purpose and supporting people out there. So I'm really honoured today to welcome my guest, Alex Williams. Welcome,
Thanks.
Alex.
Thanks for having me today, Lisa.
You're welcome. So I know you've got quite a story behind you, but I just want to start by sort of asking you what you do right now, and you know what inspires you and what kind of keeps you going.
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a mental health practitioner, work currently in between the NHS and doing a bit of private stuff. Trying to describe what I do is quite hard when you say like what mental health practitioners do, but I always describe it as like helping people to get back up when life knocks them down. You know, because we all experience a variety of challenges that when we aren't able to find a resolution through them, often can affect us mentally, emotionally over time. So we end up feeling like we're just struggling, we can't get through life, so we need some support. Yeah. And so people tend to come to see me either through their GP practice or just find me online, and I can tend to support them in whatever way they need to kind of help them recover from what they're facing. But I also do a bit of public speaking because that's a little bit of a passion of mine, talking about exactly the same thing, kind of getting to the core principles of what it takes to overcome the setbacks we face so we can go on and build a good life for ourselves. But yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, having been through what I went through when I was younger. But, you know, I just love working with people and seeing them realise their kind of potential, realising that they're better than they actually believe they are, and watching them go on to lead better lives.
Wow, fantastic. So talk me through then the things that led you to this path, and you know what it is you went through and how you then turned it around for yourself.
Yeah, of course. So it's quite a journey. I might as well start from the top, really. I was born into what I would consider a normal family in this country. My dad was a lawyer, my mum was a general nurse, and they were married. So on the outside, everything looked fine. But around the age of 3 years old, my mum and dad split up. I know it's really common for parents to split up, but my dad had an affair. Okay. So my mum rightly was like, get out, you know. So, and probably my earliest memory as a child was at that age, around that age, me leaving our house at the time with my mum, kind of wondering what the hell was going on. But, you know, it was a norm. Eventually that became the norm. You know, I lived with my mum most of the time and stayed with my dad every other weekend. So that was my life from that moment forward as a young child. My mum, understandably so, when women or anyone in fact has been cheated on, you know, although it shouldn't, we should often, in my opinion, realise that it's actually the cheater that's the problem here. We believe there's something wrong with us. How could someone cheat on us, right? So I think my mum, that obviously destroyed her confidence, and she, although had a couple of other relationships, brief ones, from what I can remember, they're quite nice people, she ended up getting in a relationship with someone who was very abusive. Right. She ended up marrying this person. The abuse wasn't as such, like I didn't ever see him be abusive to her during this stage, but I grew up in the household there from then on, when watching him like beat his children up. You know, I can remember one time as a really young kid walking down the stairs and seeing him actually beat two of his young boys up and thinking, I'm going to be next. So my life at home with my mum was, even, you know, I loved my mum, but I think, you know, I'm young, you don't really think about love and that. They're the people who look after you, right? But like, it was very much, I lived in fear because I felt like he was going to possibly attack me, attack my sister. Although he never did, it was just that, you know, that constant on edge. So I hated to be there. Yeah. Now, every other weekend when I was with my dad, he was like, someone threw this term at me the other day, which I'd never heard of. He was like the party dad, just doing all the good stuff, you know. He lived in London. It was amazing. You know, we'd go for pizza. He'd buy me toys. He'd take me out and do these fun things. And so I just idolised my dad because it was like, oh, I'm so much fun and it's such an escape from living in this household, right? So I remember thinking, oh, look, I wish I could live with my dad, because in my mind, you're a kid, right? And you're just like thinking, well, okay, if this is what it's like 2 days a weekend, I wish it's always. Imagine it could be like this all the time. Obviously, I didn't know any better, but that's how I perceived it. But when I was going back with Mum, things were getting more and more difficult. I remember I was about 8 at the time, and we moved in with my grandparents briefly. So my mum obviously tried to get out of this relationship. Okay. So we lived with my grandparents for a few months at that time. My stepdad was stalking us, like literally parking around the corner from where we were living at the time, and like, you know, who'd be there, and that was quite scary. So we never wanted to go back, but my mum did. She decided that she was going to go back. I don't know the reasons why. I got the sense that now in hindsight that maybe there was some pressure. One failed marriage. Was this going to be another failed marriage? We were born in like a Christian family, not heavily Christian, but I think there was a lot. My grandparents on her side went to the church, so I think there was a bit of pressure, a bit of stigma, a bit of shame. Yeah. So I think she went back to try and make it work, and eventually we went back. But about 2 months into being back, one night I was just sleeping in my sister's room. I can remember why I was sleeping in my sister's room, because again I was terrified to be in my own room, didn't want to be on my own in that house, just because I was worried about what he may do. And one night these policemen just burst into my room, in our room, in fact, me and my sisters were sleeping, and he woke me up, took me down the stairs, out of the house, put me into one of those big like police vans, you know, I call them meat wagons, where they cart the drunken people off on a Saturday night when they're misbehaving. And they took me to the local police station. Now, I'll be honest, like the police to me at that age, I just thought they were there to put bad people in prison. You know, I thought, you know, I've watched TV programs. I think it was The Bill was on when I was a kid, and you know, it was awful TV from what I remember. But like that was it. So I just used to think they were there to arrest bad people. Yeah. And now I was a nuisance when I was a kid. Now, like, I was always chatty, getting in trouble, nothing major. So part of me was like, maybe I've done something wrong. The police are going to arrest me.
So you got all the way there, but didn't know anything.
Yeah, I had no idea.
And your sister? Was she with you?
Yeah, she was with us. Okay. Yeah. And my step siblings at the time. Right. So we got to the police station. I was in my pajamas. Like, oh, this is weird. It was just surreal. And then they sat me and my sister down. And one of the policemen, there was 5 of them, from what I remember at the time, sat down, knelt in front of me and said, "I'm sorry, son, but your mum is dead." Oh. So obviously, understandably, I just like burst into tears. You know, I was like, "What the hell?" Didn't know at the time what had happened. Yeah. But I found out a day, 2 later, basically through watch. I mean, I think I must have been told what happened by my family, but I remember watching the news and it came up that my mum had been killed. It was really like one of those brief clips. You found
out through the news your mum had been murdered?
I think we already kind of knew, but I remember watching it on the news.
Okay.
As in, like, it came up. Like, it was one of those, it wasn't even, you know, for me, it's the main headline. It should be like, we're going to talk about this for 5 minutes, but it was literally like a brief clip on also where, in this town in Eastbourne, it was where we were living, this person has been killed. And that was it. So right from the moment I was told that, I mean, it was just, it's hard to recall how I felt other than being in tears and being like, what the hell's going on? It was almost like, you know, you just kind of, you're not there. You like dissociate, you kind of leave your body a bit. It's like, this is just surreal. But like, I can remember like having a strong feeling inside me that, you know, okay, well, if this has happened to me, and, you know, I don't know anyone in my life who's had their mum killed like that, you know, at that age. So I was like, what chances or what possibilities are there going to be for me in life now? You know, I'm a damaged kid, you know. Now, that, you know, that's understandable to an extent, but equally my dad, who was then responsible for us, he took over, and, you know, in a part of me was like, I remember feeling like, I've got what I wanted. Yeah. Like, I didn't believe in like spirituality or anything as such then. I wasn't aware that maybe there's, I mean, I don't know now, do I? But I do have this belief that there is more to death and my life after death, and that my mum's here with me because it helps me. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it helps me. But I can remember like thinking, oh, maybe I've caused this, you know, have I got what I wanted in a way? But anyway, my dad took over, and so part of me was like, yeah, this will be all right. And my dad was wealthy, and with the good intentions, I believe his idea was just to plough loads of money into us. You know, I'm going to build you this big house. Right. We did stay with our grandparents for 9 months, who were amazing. And I literally put their care down to the reason I'm probably not significantly traumatised from what happened that night and what happened in those early years, because it's literally like they just allowed us to be however we needed to be. It was like safe environment. We could play. We could, you know, I loved my football. I loved playing with toys, Transformers, things like that. It was just like they fed us what we wanted. Maybe not the perfect diet that you would see now. You know, I don't think I ate many vegetables during that time, but they just gave us what we wanted. But they created that safety. But living with my dad, it was all right for a while, but I think quickly the messaging that we were getting around what I was experiencing about, you know, we didn't even talk about my mum dying. It was like it just wasn't even mentioned. It wasn't like, oh, you know, how did that feel? What you're going through? You know, you must be distraught, upset. Or no one asked me, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? So it's kind of a subject not to be spoken about. And whenever I was upset or ever wanted to kind of raise any concerns or to express the feelings of distress or whatever I was feeling, it was kind of very much shut down. Not in like a real, like, you need to shut up, but it was more like, oh, you know, you need to be grateful for what you do have, you know, kind of get over it. And some of the messaging was like really toxic, like most dads would put their children in an orphanage, you know, and messages like that. So like, but I didn't know any better, right? My dad's, to me, now my number one idol. I've already idolised him up until the point my mum's died. But now he's the only he's got my only parent left. I can't do anything to break that relationship. I just need to change who I am, essentially, to keep him happy. So
people pleasing and
essentially, I am a recovering people pleaser, is what I like to refer myself as. But I was so I grew up in that environment. Now, obviously, like, there was still good times. I was good at football when I was a kid, and my dad invested loads of energy into that and supported me to get probably as far as I could have got. Maybe I could have got further. My attitude wasn't the greatest, but I think I was one of those teenagers at that point who was like, you know, I'd rather go out and see women and go parties than avoid that so I can play football. So there were good times. But generally, I've realised that because I was hiding parts of me, who I really was, how I was feeling, and all I was doing was looking to please him and other people, I never really discovered who I was. Never really discovered what I wanted to do in life, or the kind of person I wanted to be. So by the time I kind of got, you know, I chose subjects, for example, in school that were what he wanted me to do. It was like, what do you want me to do? Do all the sciences because you'll earn money. You know, that's kind of the mentality, right? Never want, you know, and if I look back, it would have been music. Psychology wasn't optional at GCSE, but something along those lines, things like that, which I was interested in, but I never chose because I thought, oh, well, they're not going to keep him happy. But by the time I left sixth form, and you know, I'll be honest, I just wasted my time in sixth form because I didn't want to be there. I was studying subjects I weren't interested in. I liked biology. I did all right in that. The others I failed because I was in the pub and just spending too much time with my friends. So I take responsibility for that. But I left with no idea, again, of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. And I kind of just felt like this massive failure because, you know, my dad was successful, like work-wise. And I felt, you know, so I had partly thinking I was a failure to him. I've lost my mum. Like, what can I possibly hope for in life? And generally, I find when I'm working with people who've been through significant stuff and have that kind of mindset, is that they kind of believe they just need to settle. Generally, generally for like a steady job, a roof over your head, and find any old partner who kind of just to put up with you. So in my mind, from that point on, it was kind of my mindset that that's all I'd ever amount to. But, you know, I went and trained to be a mental health nurse. Now, that was never a goal of mine, an aspiration, a dream. It was just someone told me, oh, by the way, you should go do it and they pay you. And I thought, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose then, and I'll get like a steady qualification at the end of the day. So I went to do that and I loved it. I did it for 3 years, training at university, had loads of clinical placements in loads of different areas, and I was one of the few students, I think, who actually enjoyed all their clinical placements. I was like, this is amazing, you know, I like this. Now that managed to create some stability in my life because, you know, I had the steady job, right? So I was like, okay, I've got an all right career here. I'm doing all right. I'm helping people and being a people pleaser. You know, that fed into that. Oh, you know. And in many ways, I've spoken about this before, in fact, that my career, because I was working with very unwell people mentally, you know, you're talking about diagnosis of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, you're talking about borderline personality disorder, but like the top end, really unwell people who need to be admitted to hospital under section, you know, the Mental Health Act. So I was looking at them thinking, well, I've been through all this. I'm not that bad. They're much worse than me. At least I'm not like that. So all the time I was just avoiding the pain, you know. Again, this became another reason, pleasing my dad, to just never ever look at this stuff. Now, for many years that was okay. But by the time I got to the age of 34, I'd had a few semi-serious relationships before then, but I'd met someone, and we were engaged and we had a mortgage. So I was like, God, I finally achieved this goal of settling, which was kind of like the settling. I had the house, I had the steady job, and I had someone who put up with me. No, I haven't got a complaint about that person, but that was the person I was with at the time. But then they decided they didn't want to be with me anymore, which meant I lost my house. And it just sent me into a spiral of like,
right,
this is another awful thing that's happened to me. I've had multiple things that I grew up in the environment that I as a child, what happened with my mum, what I witnessed when I was really young, how my dad treated me. And when I look at this on the scale of things, this is much less than some of that stuff. But it was like it was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I've got nothing left in me. Like, I'm 34, and at the time 34 to me felt old. Now it feels young because I'm obviously 41. And I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? But I was like, I just can't do it anymore. To get my own house, that's going to take me ages to save for. I'm 34, who's going to want me? I've got a dog, which, I have to look after, and I loved him to bits. And so I was kind of like, just felt like I was nothing. I was worth nothing. I didn't matter. I wasn't important. My relationship with my dad was like pretty much, I was putting up with him, but I was like, I didn't feel happy. I just didn't feel like it mattered to anyone. So I started experience, I just thought, well, my way out is just to end my own life. So these thoughts were just running through my head. I was driving along and thinking, I could just swerve off the road and that would be it, and no one would care. And, I'd be with my mum in a way because of my spiritual beliefs in a way. I was like, maybe I can be with my mum, I'll be okay. Yeah. And if it wasn't for my dog, I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be here, because I was like, who's going to look after him? I loved him to bits, and I was like, and I often find with people that having something else to look after you, look after other than yourself when you're struggling, can be a really good thing to keep you going. But it was a book by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if you heard of Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a man he was a survivor from the concentration camps, a Jewish survivor from the concentration camps in World War II. And he basically, I think it was only 1 out of 26 people actually made out alive, from the camps he was in. So you're thinking like, God, this guy, it's the worst trauma you could possibly imagine. But he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it's quite a famous book. But it was like, and I remember reading at the time, because I was in my own work, I was kind of thinking, I was just looking up stuff to kind of help people with, and there was this phrase, and I slightly changed it because it's a bit dated now, but it was like, everything can be taken from you except your ability to choose how you respond, your ability to choose your own way. And I'm a cynical guy, so when I hear people have these light bulb moments that change their life, I'm always like, whatever. But it was like, something just went off.
That hit you.
It just, something in my mind went off and made me realise that I'm 34 and I don't feel like any decision I've made, even though yes, they have been my decisions technically, they've never been something that I actually wanted to. I never intentionally chose. Yeah. I never really intentionally chose my response, because I was always choosing it to please other people.
Yes.
And it just made me suddenly realise, it's like, oh, so what would my life look like if I decided to choose? Like, what would I be doing? And it just made me realise that I wanted to do a bit more. It got me into the speaking, but it made me want to understand what these core principles are that enable people to overcome the adversities they face. Because your job you do, the work you do, there's so many modalities, aren't there? We know that from CBT to EMDR, you've got somatic therapies, all these different things now, and obviously they're all good in their own right. But what I was finding was that none of them really mattered unless you got the core principles right. Yeah. So then I was like, right, what are these things? And it just sent me on a journey of just looking in all the people I've worked with over the years, and all other inspirational people who have done amazing things, people like Nelson Mandela, for example. And I was like, oh, that's it. And we'll talk about these in a bit, I'm sure. But like, it just made me realise that if I started applying them to my life, what could I possibly do? And it just changed. Now, it wasn't like my life's amazing now. Like, there's been ups and downs still. But every time I've applied the principles that I've kind of learned through that experience, and what I apply in my life and what I apply with people now, it always helps me through.
So when you talk about this sort of path that you opened up to, was that the way in which you started to face your own, the things that you went through? Because by the sounds of it, you didn't really have the chance when you were young and or the opportunity to maybe talk to people. How did that all work? Yeah.
Well, actually, the first thing was to realise and that what I've been through. Can I swear? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It said I was shit.
Yeah.
To actually acknowledge that what I've been through, everything I've been through. Yeah. Massive understatement. It was kind of like I spent so much of my life running away from it, telling myself I was okay. And I appreciate it's a massive cliche in the mental health space, but it's really, really true. But it was actually to admit it's okay to not feel okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be absolutely distraught about losing my mum and wishing she was here. It's okay to not be okay about how I was treated at times by my dad, how my emotions were just dismissed. It's okay to not feel okay, to be told that most dads put their children in an orphanage. It's okay to not feel okay about pursuing things to please other people and then feeling like you're a failure because you're letting them down, when in reality you should be choosing what you want to do. So all these things, it was kind of reflect on my whole life and allow myself to actually be, rather than putting a smile on my face and pretending I was all right, just going, this is crap.
Yeah.
Which in a way, and accepting that, which in a way was then, even though it was like, oh my God, that's awful, and that just unleashed a load of grief within me. In a way, it was kind of freeing, because I think what I was doing is I was carrying this massive baggage around with me of stuff, or like ball and chain, for example, of all this stuff I wasn't able to look like, wondering while I was struggling, and then looking at it and go, oh, that's the reason. And then able to look at it and start unpacking it.
Did you ever get closure on what happened with your mum, in the sense that was her husband then? Was it husband at the time?
Married,
Was he ever charged? Did you ever kind of get to a point where you knew what happened?
So we had, obviously, as you understand, there's loads of family dysfunction that I've described in there, and not being able to talk about it meant I didn't know a lot about what happened. Right. I do know he went to prison, but I only actually found out this year, in fact, which even made me realise how bad the dysfunction was and how I'd been kind of conditioned to never really ask questions about stuff. I found out that that obviously he killed her, but then the police tried to make out that it was a crime of passion, that my mum was the problem, that and this wasn't true. Right, it was very much a sign of the times back in the early 90s, but also that my stepdad had tried to carry her body to, I don't know if it's the right place, but somewhere like Beachy Head or somewhere, and throw her body over, but he couldn't get her out of the house, so to make it look like a suicide. And then that kind of get in your mind, it goes, oh God, imagine I'd grown up all this time thinking my mum had killed myself, all this sort of stuff. Yeah. So these are things that are only relatively recently discovered. So when it comes to closure, I don't have closure, but one thing I do believe in is that closure isn't necessarily necessary. I think one thing I've found in the work I do with people is that we kind of believe that to move forward and recover, we have to close another chapter, close that past stuff, heal, let it go, whatever, seal this language. And actually, I've realised you can live in both spaces. You can still wish things had been different. You can still regret all the mistakes you've made. You can still be like, I wish my mum was here. Yeah. And heal, move forward, live a good life.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing. So, and you know what? I might sit here in 20, 30 years' time and be like, actually, no, I've closed it. But I've realised that's not necessary. And I know it's kind of pushed on some people, but it isn't necessary. So, no, I don't have closure, but I have acceptance that it's happened and I can't change it.
Yeah. And that acceptance, I think, what you were talking about earlier, in just accepting how you felt and that it was okay to not be okay, that whole, all of that is part of the acceptance, and it allows you, I think, to move forward when there isn't closure, when there aren't answers, where there's still regrets, and a lot of us live with these things. I mean, this situation is very extreme, but I think in general, a lot of people live with, they do live with regrets, and it's all right, like you say, to move forward, to try and find that new path. So when you kind of then embarked on this new stuff that you started to, feel like had some purpose in your life, what did you do? What were the things you focused on?
Well, I like to make out that I completely like recovered and everything at that point, but I think what I still was guilty of doing, even though I started to acknowledge that what I've been through was awful, I was still avoiding a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I kind of got caught up in a lot of the new agey, law of attraction-y stuff, the positive thinking, which is which don't get me wrong, some of it's good, but I think in a way it suited the way I'd already been living my life, because it was like, if I could just, I'll think of all the amazing things I could do and about how amazing I can be. In a way, it still avoids
it's
the
escapism, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Exactly what it was. So
Yeah.
I kind of went into a little bit cuckoo land, and I thought, I was listening to Tony Robbins and things like that, and I remember thinking, I'm going to be that guy. But what I realised, after a while of chasing that, thinking, I need to do this, essentially what I was still trying to do was prove myself to my dad.
Yeah.
I was still like, still wasn't doing what I wanted. It was still more like, I'm going to show you, look what I can become despite of what I've been through.
Yeah.
So it was still really coming from an unhealthy place.
Yeah.
And so I was just, and really, I guess I wanted to be successful in that sense because I wanted to be liked. But I wanted to be liked because I didn't like myself. And more importantly, because I was still seeking approval from those I don't really need approval from.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that's the case for everyone who's famous, but I do wonder sometimes those who are attracted to fame, is that sense of like,
it's that validation, isn't it?
I don't like who I am. I'm not getting it from those closest to me. Because something in more recent times, especially since having my daughter this year, it's like that kind of desire to be famous, successful in like what we would traditionally call successful, especially now with social media and stuff. It's kind of gone. It's like, I don't feel a need to do it. It's like, if I was to, obviously we don't want to, things can change anyway, but if I was to live my life how it is now for the rest of my life, I'd be really happy because I'm so content, which is like the first time it's ever like happened like that, and someone actually said to me, I think I was interviewed me earlier this year, and it was a saying that stuck with me since, and they said that happiness is the absence of desire. And that really hit me, and I thought, that's what I'm experiencing. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it was kind of like, I feel like I've got what I want and what I need right now.
Yeah.
And so early on, that new path I was on was very much, even though it was a better path, it was still very much driven by avoidance and trying to prove myself.
So when did you face this stuff? Because it sounds like you've got to a much healthier place, much more sort of, you're real with everything now.
Yeah. Well, I try to be.
Yeah. I mean, we're always learning, but did you have a moment, or was it just a gradual sort of, as you started to change in yourself, you started to face things?
I think it was the point when, although I was gradually facing things and was aware of it and acknowledging what happened, it was the point where I realised that my pursuits were then making me feel like I didn't want to be here anymore.
Okay.
This pursuit of success, this pursuit of trying to prove myself to other people who I don't need their approval of. It was like I was just remember being in my office at home and just thinking, God, I'm not happy. This isn't what I want. And at what point am I going to have to get to where I'm going to feel happy? And I was like, is that ever going to happen? And I'm a massive believer in that. Although I don't believe you need to wake up every morning loving what you do, I do believe that the journey has to have some kind of purpose and meaning to you. It has to give you something. And although, yes, I liked the stuff I was talking about in the speaking and the coaching and that, I kind of was like, no, I need to be doing something different. I miss being around people. The speaking wasn't giving me what I felt I wanted, even though I still love speaking. It was like, I like working with people.
Yeah.
And seeing them through the journey, not just going up, doing a talk and saying, off you go, hope it works out.
That one-to-one interaction.
Yeah, I love it. And I was still doing it in my coaching, but I felt like one of the issues I have with the wellbeing space is I feel like a lot of people say they want to help people, but then they charge people ridiculous fees. And I know, having, I've been doing this for about 20 years now. Before I left the NHS to do my private stuff, I was like, well, actually, the people who struggle, the people who can't afford to pay that, they rely on what the GP can provide, what local mental health services can provide, what charities can provide. So I decided at that point I was going to go forward, because it was just a new realisation. Actually, it was better, even though it was going back to NHS, it was actually going forward. So actually, I've learned something here. I miss doing this, and started doing that work. On top of the speaking as well and the private stuff. Yeah. And that was kind of like, that's when I felt the acceptance really kicked in. It was like, actually, Alex, you're listening to what you actually want and what you actually need emotionally.
Yeah.
rather than what you believe you should want and what you believe you should
Yeah.
need.
That's a big step, I
Yeah.
think. You know, I think a lot of people go through their own journeys, and for whatever reason, I mean, yours is from a very young age. You were, you know, in a place where you were probably very scared and didn't feel like you could be yourself. And you know, abusive situations, obviously, quite often, I think they do this to people. They kind of force them into a place where they don't feel safe operating from who they are, so they become who they think they need to be to then A, be safe, and B, just kind of get on in life in a way that people will validate, because it's a safe thing, and it's completely understandable. But I think one of the biggest things in our, you know, in those people in these journeys is to actually just sit back and be able to hear your own thoughts, your own whatever desires or whatever it is that's sitting within you, and then have the bravery and courage to follow them regardless of what, because that is huge to step out of that people pleasing, that fear based, and understandably it was a, you know, it was a situation where you weren't safe. So I think, like, massive congratulations on doing that, because some people probably never manage to do it. They step into something and feel that they're safe and may do all right in life, and it just never really gets to a point where they're authentic and operating from a true place within themselves. And I think that's when you're at your most. That's when you find happiness, I think. And like you say, you are in a happier place. How's your relationship, if I can ask, how's your relationship now with your dad and your sister and, you know, the people who were around you when things got really hard at the start?
So I don't have a relationship with my dad. I decided that early this year. Having a little daughter does tell you, it makes you, like, my tolerance has definitely dropped, not for having a little daughter, but for the crap I'm willing to put up with. But you know, early this year, he didn't know I was having a daughter, because I wasn't really having any contact. He occasionally texted me, but I was like, no. You know, he chose to. He's remarried. He's had 2 little kids since then, and I wasn't involved in any of that really. So I was kind of like, you know, you do your own thing. It felt to me like, you know, I'm not being appreciated, so I don't need you in my life. But when my daughter was born, I was like, you know what, I'm going to open the door again. Okay. And because I was like, a part of me was like, and I think all people who have experienced like family dysfunction, have had let's just call them abusive parents. Yeah. Part of them will always wonder if their parents can change. I think that's one thing it's easy to say cut people out, but I think that part of us always thinks, I wonder if they can change. So that was what was going on. I was thinking, maybe I've got a daughter that would change. And it was at my uncle's funeral that I met him for the first time. He actually texted me to say my uncle died, which was really sudden, but we went along and I thought, you know what, I'm going to offer the olive branch. I didn't actually bring up any of the stuff, just thought I'm going to be nice. And I told him I had a daughter, and I was like, let's meet up. Now he's been a bit difficult about it, but it was kind of when we started talking again, and he'd send these cryptic texts about like, you know, people kind of basically saying like no one's there for him, but they are, but they're not, and kind of like alluding to the fact that we're not there anymore. So it was very much the same as what it was before. And I decided, you know what? And it was scary as hell. I'm going to actually call him out on a little bit of stuff. Not like horrible. I was very polite about it, but I'm going to call you out on some of the stuff. I think that these are the reasons like why we're not here as much, you know. And you know, and I know things are hard, but you know, maybe it's some acknowledgement. But the first response was, I gave you everything. And it was like almost like an instant dismissal. So I just like, in a moment of like fury, I just sent this sort of text. It was quite well controlled, to be honest, but I just poured out what I actually felt, how I felt, and said, I'm going to block you and I don't want anything to do with you. I acknowledged it might change, because again, like I just said, I think there will always be a part of me who hope that he might knock on the door and said, I'm so sorry. Because he's my dad, and I did have some amazing memories of him, especially when I was young, and he did do some good stuff. It wasn't like 100% bad. But at that point I was like, no. And that was very freeing. And I think having a daughter, because I guess the driving force for me was like, I went through that. I do not want my daughter to be
Yeah.
raised or
Yeah.
have people around her who are going to make her feel amazing at one moment and then make her feel like crap the next. And knowing that little kids tend to think that everything's about them, I didn't
Yeah.
want her growing up and that, you know, she's going to have bad people in her life, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, people she meets at school or whatever, that's just life. But I didn't want, if I could control some of the people in her life, I thought, I don't want you in it. I'm not having that.
Yeah.
Now, everyone else, like all my grandparents have passed away. But me and my sister got an amazing relationship. Literally, we've been through so much together. And yes, we fall out. I love to take the piss out of her. She takes the piss out of me. But we've always got each other's backs. And, you know, my auntie, who was my mum's twin, I wasn't very close when I was younger because I think my dad was very much like, he didn't like that side of the family, so he wanted to keep us away.
Yeah.
But she's been amazing, and basically all my family who are still alive are still amazing. We don't spend that much time together because we're all over the place. I mean, it's England, you know, it could be in a country like America, but like where we're even more spread out. But we have some contact, but we don't see much else. But the rest of them, you know, the relationship's good.
Yeah,
you know, so.
And I didn't realise your mum had a twin.
Yeah.
So have you ever talked like in depth about how it all happened, how she felt?
Yeah, it's a little bit. Again, probably there's a part of me that just, you know, as I said, doesn't ask questions because you don't want to get upset. But like, I remember like one thing, and it could be, I'm pretty sure I haven't made this up. She did say like, you know, she just knew that night something was wrong.
Right.
And my auntie's really struggled. Like she's an amazing person, but I think, you know, knowing your twin sister's just been murdered by someone, you know, because it did rip apart the family in that sense. You know, I think my granddad on my mum's side had a heart attack, and it just, you know, my auntie's mental health, I'm pretty sure, went downhill, and she's in a much better place now. But like, you know, that obviously destroyed her. Again, my girlfriend always asks, you should ask more questions about what that was like. Part of me doesn't want to always dig it up because, I mean, you know, but part of me does want to know. But equally, I'm like, I know enough. We have spoken about it, but yeah, I think there's a lot of guilt, not from my auntie, but I know from my grandparents, because I think they kind of like, why didn't we get her out of this relationship, you know?
Yeah, but I suppose you wouldn't. I mean, there are many abusive relationships out there, but you don't really expect them to end that way.
No.
Even though some of them do, it's just not something you'd expect. But when you talk about the days where you felt quite suicidal, I guess, and it was your dog, or it was the thought of your dog not having anyone, that part of when it was really intense, how did you make your way out of that beyond the thought of your dog not having someone?
I think it was just kind of the rational part of you, like, is this actually going to help? I know I work with people who are suicidal every day, and I know that most of the time we explore what keeps people going. There was enough, and usually it's like connections and family members and like the thought of what it would do to them. There was enough of me to think that maybe someone might struggle with this, and I think it was probably the thought. My sister, really, I know I said my dog kept me alive in those moments, but I think, you know, the thoughts that were going through my head is like writing suicide notes, and in a way some of them are quite angry. I was like, part of them wanted they were going to be fuck yous to certain people, you know. I was like, no, look what you've done. And now I feel quite bad about that because, you know, I wouldn't want anyone to feel that necessarily, but it was my sister. Like, you know, she's been massively affected by what happened to my mum, and to put that on her, I think was the like, God, you know, yes, okay, me leaving would mean my pain would stop, but my pain would then go to her. Yeah. And I know I don't agree with shaming or making people who are feeling suicidal feel guilty, but equally I think it's important to be real about what happens when people die, and that does happen. You know, people then, the pain then moves on to someone else, and that's not necessarily their fault, but that's what happens because people, you know, you mourn, you grieve the person, you wonder what could have been different. Could I have changed their decision making? Could I have made a better life for them? And I think for me, it was like kind of in those moments when I was like, you know, could I just do this, or, you know, should I go get some rope from B&Q or something like that, and just go somewhere and do it? I was like, someone's going to find me, and my sister's going to find out, and that, you know.
Yeah, that is that thought process of, well,
yeah.
how is this going to play
Yeah,
out after that can...
So I know that
yeah.
my suicide ideation, although it's very real, wasn't the worst it could be, because often people who do act on it think that the people they care about would be better off.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, there's the feeling like a burden, there's the hopelessness and stuff like that. So
yeah, wow. So in terms of now what you do, is that healing for you? Do you find it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what I've always believed in when it comes to working in the mental emotional health space is that prevention's better than cure.
Yeah.
And that getting to people early and making them aware that what they're experiencing is expected, is understandable given the circumstance they have faced or are currently facing, I find like really rewarding. Because, you know, I've worked in mental health, say, for 20 years, and it used to be, and it still is to an extent, like the focus on diagnosis and focus on, the problem's in you need to change the way you're thinking, or the way you need to learn some skills to manage it better. But actually most people's mental health and emotional health struggles make perfect sense when you look at them in the environments they've kind of grew in. You know, if you literally went through my whole story and looked at it, you go, oh, that makes sense why you feel that way, Alex. You know, if I went through yours, it would make sense. And that kind of do that. So I find it really rewarding. But, you know, because of my own experiences, of my own struggles with my mental emotional health, I have a thing, you know, for men's mental health. I really love because of my mum's experience, and I love supporting female victims of domestic abuse. I love it. And I also, you know, because I've not been very good with my emotions, I love working with people who struggle with their emotions, who like to make sense of them, or who like literally have real polar extreme emotional responses, usually because they haven't had their emotional experiences validated and learned the skills. So I find it hugely rewarding. I again, going back to when I first started the healing journey, it's called it, I thought I was going to get all that from talking on stages. I actually get it from the people who sit with me in the first session. You're like, you can see the hopelessness in them. You see like, this is my life's been like this for ages. And then like 6 months, a year down the line, even though things often get a little bit worse to start with, because you suddenly this realization of
you open up the
they're like, oh my God, I feel much better about myself. I feel more confident in myself. I recognize my self-worth. No, my life isn't perfect, but that building that relationship themselves literally is the best thing ever. Like it, I mean, other than seeing my daughter every day, like it for me, like work-wise, I don't think you can beat that, and I don't think I could ever bottle that up in a can and sell it. It's just something that to me it just means so much.
I really admire that, how you've just taken it, in a way, you've taken it one step at a time, and you've not forced yourself down. You realise the public speaking, it's a part of you, but it wasn't giving you everything. So it's almost like you are, you're still going through your own, you're still exploring things for yourself through the work you do and through the people that you're supporting. And I think that's really healthy, really, because you're learning from them, they're learning from you, and I think it's such a positive thing in life. You know, we're people who, I think there's people out there who have really easy, you know, seemingly easy lives. I don't think anyone has a really easy life, and you can look at them and think, oh, I really want that life. You know, I really want that. Just the ease of it. They seem to have everything. Things just land in their lap, but then I wonder, well, where do you feel purpose in that life? And it may be that they have purpose, but what you're going through and what you've been through and what you do now feels hugely purposeful. Like if you know, one day look back, or the day you're not here, the legacy you're leaving is so rich in sort of support and love and pouring out probably a lot of what was trapped in you, to be honest. Yeah. The stuff you could never get out when you were a child. It's
like a mirror in a way, a lot of the people. And obviously like you have to be aware of your own like wounds, and you don't want to like just pass all your stuff onto them. So like I do believe that it's important to share. I know in my work, we kind of, when I was training, we're told don't share your stuff, you know, but I don't think that's very helpful. I think it's more relatable when you share a little bit of your own experience. You don't I don't say, oh, by the way, this is what happened on the night my mum was murdered, but you know, I tell them, you know, this, you know, I've lost my mum to abuse and stuff, but I feel it helps you connect with people. But people like a mirror, you can kind of see them when they're like sitting there and say they've been grown up in some family dysfunction and they've got an abusive parent, and they're like, oh, but you know, I love them really, but inside you can see they just want to say, no, they're twats, you know. And then I'll go, you know, and I'll be like, you know, it's okay to say that, you know, because they are.
Yeah.
I'd say, look, what you've been grown up in isn't right.
Yeah.
No one's got a perfect childhood, but like, it doesn't mean what you've been growing up in is right. And so I think sometimes giving people that permission
Yeah.
to just, and often I get this feedback is thank you for just listening and allowing me to say what I wanted to say without judging me.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I know there's lots of time pressures in working with people, but a lot, people often feel like they're dismissed or just told there's something wrong with them. Or they're told like these cliche motivational things, like everything happens for a reason, or what's the lesson in that? And I don't believe everything happens for a reason at all. I think some things happen for no reason whatsoever, and I don't believe there's a lesson to be had from every single experience we have. But I do believe like the stories we tell ourselves about why things happening to us determine where we moving forward. So often I'm like, say what you got to say. There doesn't have to be a good thing in it.
Yeah.
But you can create better and you deserve better. And I love helping people to kind of bring that out. And it all starts with the relationship with yourself, really. That's the foundations for any recovery.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we believe by telling ourselves that if we're amazing people and we visualize all this stuff, that's the route to change. But actually, I think it's, as I said to you, it's accepting like your flaws, accepting the what we call unpleasant negative emotions, and acknowledging that you don't feel great all the time, but that's okay as well.
It's that shadow work, isn't it?
It is,
and it's funny you say that, because when I was going through sort of my journey, and I reached a point where I kept looking for the lessons in things, and I did for a long time think everything is a lesson, and I have moments where I still think that, but then other times I think, no, I don't think it always is a lesson. I think sometimes it's just an experience, and take what you want from it, and I also reached a stage where I had a abusive relationship, and I got to the point where I accepted, I forgave, and I still do, and I'm still, I hold space for the growth for everyone involved. But I also got to a point where I thought, I'm done being overly understanding and accepting of every new thing that's coming that isn't healthy, like the actions that have happened since, when that individual is aware that they have been this way, even if they're not taking accountability. I reached a point where I thought, I'm done being that kind of, oh, it's all right, you'll have another opportunity. So I think you all naturally reach a point where you go, I've opened my eyes to this, you've had your eyes open to this, and if you can choose to either see it or not. But we're all adults now, and you can, if you don't want to see the reality of it, then that is your choice. I'll let you go. And a bit like with you and your dad, you kind of reach a point where you go, it doesn't have to be massively confrontational. It just has to be like, there's a line drawn, isn't there? And there's a boundary, and then you kind of accept, you accept everything you are. And I think you just have to focus on growing yourself, and that you've got a daughter now, and you've got a new vessel to pour into, and enjoy. And I think it's such a great outcome from where you kind of came from to what you've got now.
It's really, I'm really kind of like what you said there, because I think we don't talk about this enough, but I think survivors of abuse, trauma are some of the most outwardly compassionate people there are, but that often comes at our own detriment. So to our abusers, the people who treat us wrong, within the trauma-informed space, we're like, oh, I wonder what's happened to them. They must have been something so wrong must have happened to them to be that way. They didn't really mean it. Hurt people. So in a way, like you just said, it cuts us off from being done. We're so understanding. And I was like that. And I actually think, and in the spiritual space, we look at emotions like anger as if we should never touch them. But actually, I love anger now. Not that, and that's not how you express it, but acknowledge it. It's no, I've had enough. I'm done. Fuck you. You are not going to treat me like this anymore, because you've crossed that boundary, and I've put up with it so long, and I'm not going to have it enough. And I think that's a huge step when people pleasers, like ourselves, get to that point. We're like, no, you know what? Enough. I'm done. Enough is enough. And it's such a powerful thing. Such
a powerful thing. And it's empowering. And I think it changes you, and it changes the people around you, because they start to see that you are respecting yourself in a way, and honouring yourself and your space and your whatever it is you've put in place more than you ever did. And they cannot step into that anymore. When you just say enough is enough, it is. And that's where anger is, I think, a very useful emotion to have. I think there's a place for it. There's a place where it's not healthy, but there's a place where it's very healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you go back to that, when you're talking about lessons as well, I think I don't agree. I don't necessarily there's a lesson to have anything, but I do think our experiences show us what we value and what are important to us.
Yeah.
And we don't get to decide what happens to us. That's the crap thing about life. Like you said, some have it easy, some don't. But I think the key is to find not what's the lesson, but what do we value because of what we've experienced now. And like as I say, my mum's murder meant that I now value women, or anyone in particular, in fact, but women in particular, value them appreciating themselves so they can escape abusive relationships. Because I always see every woman now I work with, if you were my mum right now, and I know I can't bring my mum back, I'm like, how can I help you? Now, I can't save everyone, and that's my job, isn't to save anyone. Everyone's responsible for their own life, but my job is to support them on that journey. So if I can be the person in their ears saying, you deserve better, you're better than this, and eventually that sinks in.
She'd be so proud. I'm sure she would.
I hope so.
Yeah, because it's quite a big thing too, but also for you to face that as well, because there's people out there who maybe have gone through abusive upbringings and things that would just want to escape it completely, and understandably, but you've kind of gone back into that environment and you're hearing firsthand things that must really strike a chord within you. And
it's weird. I'd say, I mean, obviously it does affect me. Not like I don't go home and get upset, but I think equally I'm hardened a little bit. I think doing my job for so long and being what I go through. And to be honest, one way I do have quite a warped sense of humour. So although I would never laugh about people's stories, I do sometimes laugh at the absurdity of how awful life can be for people sometimes. I'm like, God, you have really, and I wouldn't laugh in front of them, but I'm like, because if I didn't, I think you would cry. I do believe if you can't laugh, you cry to an extent. You don't have to do one or the other, but I think that's helped me a lot. But I think, I'm able to sit there and go, I'm able to feel what they feel, not what they feel exactly. I'm not I wouldn't claim I'm an empath or anything like that, but I do feel it. I acknowledge it, and that helps me go, that's awful. And usually the first thing I will be saying to people when they give me their story isn't like, what's the solution? Looking at solutions, be like just saying, that's awful. Just telling acknowledging them that it's awful what you've been through. Like, I don't know how you got through that. You've got some strength, in there to get through it. But God, you did not deserve to go through that. And just people hearing that, it's really powerful.
It's really powerful and that is very healing in itself. I think, to just, like you say, have that person that listens to you and holds space for you to just let it out. I think that is such a big step, a really crucial step in the journey. But I mean, what a story and what a experience. And I just think what you do now is fantastic. And I congratulate you for getting through everything you have and the stuff you're pouring out there. I really admire. So thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.